Hello, you're listening to On This Day with Brian Byrne. It's Thursday, 21st of May 2020. On this day, two solo aviation records were set by Charles Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart separately in 1927 and 1932. Lindbergh landed his Spirit of St. Louis in Paris on the 21st of May 1927, becoming the first solo flyer to cross the Atlantic. 5 years later, landing in Derry, Ireland on the 21st of May, Earhart became the first woman to do so. For each, the feat brought fame. Both, however, experienced tragedy. In his life for Lindbergh, in her death for Earhart. Lindbergh was a former barnstorming exhibition aviator and a U.S. airmail pilot, and his particular flight across the Atlantic was both carefully organized and a major change-maker in aviation. It was 8 years after Alcock and Brown had flown from Newfoundland, crash-landing in the west of Ireland. In 1919, New York hotelier Raymond Ortigue had initiated a $25,000 prize for the first non-stop flight between New York and Paris, in either direction. Many well-financed attempts were made, none successful, and several fatal. Lindbergh managed to get backing from two St. Louis businessmen, and with a little of his own money, he set out to find a plane. Most willing to sell wanted to pick their own pilot. So in the end, Lindbergh and a small plane maker, Ryan Aircraft Company in San Diego, designed and built a monoplane specifically for the trip. In reference to his backers, it was named the Spirit of St. Louis. Early on May 20, 1927, Lindbergh took off from Roosevelt Field in Long Island. With the heavy fuel load, he recalled later that he'd just cleared telephone lines at the end of the runway. The solo journey took 33.5 hours, with many difficulties that included climbing over storm clouds, dealing with icing and fog. Lindbergh said that during some sections he was no more than 10 feet above the waves. He didn't have any radio navigation equipment, but managed to keep his course across the sea and landed at Le Bourget Aerodrome at 10:22 p.m. on the 21st. A crowd estimated at some 150,000 was waiting to watch him land. When he got back to the U.S. in early June, Lindbergh was lauded and feted. He was given a ticker tape parade and was given the check for the prize on the 16th of June, 1927. He was awarded, controversially and probably illegally, 2 presidential military honors. He was also the first Time magazine Man of the Year in January 1928. His flight promoted airmail post and interest in other commercial flying. Lindbergh became an aeronautical consultant, laying out international routes for airlines such as Pan Am. He married Anne Morrow, the daughter of a U.S. ambassador who had been also his financial advisor. Their first child, Charles Augustus Lindbergh, Jr., was abducted from his crib at their home in New Jersey on March 1st, 1932. He was just 20 months old. Despite the payment of a $50,000 ransom, the child was not returned. His remains were found in May that year in woods near the family's home. In 1934, a carpenter from the Bronx was arrested for the crime, convicted, and executed in 1936. The Lindberghs went to live in Europe in 1935 to escape the publicity, but returned before World War II broke out. At the request of the military, Lindbergh helped to prepare the U.S. Air Corps for war. His personal view was that America should not intervene, but he did support the action once it did enter the war. In later life he became a writer, explorer, and environmentalist. He died at the age of 72 in Hawaii, where he's buried. Amelia Earhart was born in Kansas, and in her 20s became an accomplished pilot. She funded her $1,000 cost of flying lessons by working at a variety of jobs, including photographer, truck driver, and stenographer. Her first of many records was reaching 14,000 feet in a second-hand plane she'd bought, becoming the highest flight by a woman pilot. She had already flown the Atlantic before her solo flight, in 1928 as a third seat with pilot Wilmer Stultz and his mechanic Louis Gordon. They flew from Newfoundland to Wales, and when back home again the three were given a ticker tape parade. Earhart was promoted as a celebrity, and money from endorsements and a lecture tour helped her in a campaign to advocate for female pilots. On May 20, 1932, Earhart took off from Harbour Grace in Newfoundland in a single-engine Lockheed Vega. She had planned to go to Paris, but after a flight of almost 15 hours, she put down in a field outside Derry. A farmhand who saw her asked, "Have you come far?" He may or may not have been impressed when she replied, "From America." In subsequent years, she became the first aviator to fly solo from Hawaii to California, and also from Mexico City non-stop to New York. She also became involved in competitive air racing and set several speed and distance records. In 1936, she began planning the goal of her life, a round-the-world flight. A first attempt in March 1937 in a Lockheed Electra failed with a damaged undercarriage on a Pacific island. On a second attempt in July with navigator Fred Noonan, their plane disappeared near the Nukumanu Islands in the Pacific. A myriad of later conspiracy theories about her death are for other places. Today is for remembering Charles Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart in their respective transatlantic successes.